Welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. In every episode, we explore how people from educators and artists to executives and entrepreneurs lead with authenticity, rise through adversity, and share the wisdom they've gained along the way. Today's guest is Timothy White, one of the most acclaimed photographers of our time. For more than 4 decades, Timothy has created iconic images of some of the most recognizable figures in entertainment, music, politics, and culture, including Miley Cyrus, Guns N' Roses, Aretha Franklin, Brad Pitt, and countless others. But beyond the remarkable career is a fascinating story of creativity, resilience, reinvention, and human connection. His upcoming memoir and companion photo book, Life Through My Lens, offer an intimate look at the moments behind the photographs and the lessons learned through success, heartbreak, risk-taking, and personal transformation. Timothy, welcome to Expressions of Leadership. It's such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Michele. Thanks for having me.
Now, Timothy, you didn't grow up with a formal plan to become a photographer. So what drew you first to images and visual storytelling as a young person?
In the book, I kind of recognize in writing it kind of where some of it came from. It certainly came from my childhood. It came from a box of snapshots that my family had. It was a shoebox, and there was all these snapshots thrown in there, and they were all different sizes, different formats. I remember the paper, they had decal edge around it, and some of them were bent and some of them had pencil on the back, and fill or whatever it was. But doing family get-togethers, we'd pull them out and spread them out on the dining room table or something after dinner and laugh and talk about family. What was something that was really recognizable to me was how cool they were, the compositions. I'm really all about history, and so there was old cars or a wardrobe or something about it. Some were in the winter, some were in the summer. Everything was sort of different, but it really told a story. And then, as a kid, I also watched a lot of old movies, and I would love that. And I'd sit at home late at night and watch the Late Late Show, or even the Late 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 Show at the time, and just watch old black and white movies. And so I just got this sense of composition and lighting and storytelling and how they all work together. And although at the time I wasn't like thinking about photography or a career or anything like that, it definitely resonated with me in some way.
And you said that you picked up a camera and it just sort of clicked, no pun intended.
Oh, you intended this.
What was it about photography that felt different from everything else?
It wasn't that I picked up a camera to be serious. I picked up a camera to sort of have some fun with it and almost to create my own history or my own family snapshots in a way. And music at the time was such a big, important part of my life. And, um, you know, I grew up, I was born in the late 50s, and I grew up with older sisters. And so I grew up with sort of the British invasion and the Beatles and all of that. And all of a sudden, the album covers and music became a really big thing. And so I started to see album covers, which was the advertising for the music industry in a way, right? It represented the artist visually, and they were art, and they were amazing. They were beautiful. And it was also a connection to that artist, and the music, which it resonates emotionally for all of us. And then music magazines of the period, I just remember them, and that really stayed in my mind. And I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I love this photography." And you kind of get a sense of the subject and their life.
You eventually attended the Rhode Island School of Design, one of the most respected art schools in the country. And there you learned to focus on process rather than outcomes. How has that idea shaped your life and your career?
Oh, tremendously shaped my life. What I got from it was that the process was what was important. It was what it took to it was presence, a big word for me, something I like to really think about a lot, and that's about focus on what you're doing, um, and if you do that, the most important part of it is not the end result. It's not the exhibition. It's the work and the time that you put into discovery and to exploring and to try and get to that place where it's worthy of an exhibition, where you feel you've completed something, where you've worked through a creative process. I had actually gone to another school to study landscape architecture, and I realized it wasn't right for me after the first year, and then transferred to this art school. And the difference was that everyone in this art school was there because they wanted to be there. It wasn't because they were trying to please their parents and get a liberal arts degree, or it wasn't just the thing to do after high school. It was, like everybody did. Instead, it was they were artists and they wanted to draw, they wanted to sketch, they wanted to be around art, they wanted to produce, they wanted to be creative. And just being around that environment really was like an eye-opening for me. You went to your classes, you did your thing, and then you went home and had dinner, and then you went back to the studio and you worked at night. Like that's what you did. You worked on your art, and that was a mindset that really set the tone for me about my commitment to my creativity and what I do.
You mentioned leaving landscape architecture to pursue something much less certain in art. What gave you the courage to trust your instincts at such an early age?
I felt when I left high school, high school was like a party for me, in a lot of ways, just the time it was and everything else. And I just felt like I needed to do something that was career minded or something. And so that's why I went into landscape architecture. I was really involved in horticulture and plants, and I was very kind of hippy dippy too at the time. And it just felt right for me, but yet it was sort of a professional endeavor. But once I got there, I realized that it wasn't for me, and that really wasn't my style, and that I was much more, I don't know, but less professional and more arty, if you will. And it just seemed like that's really where I belonged. And the camera seemed to be my vehicle to get there. Um, it it was a time in my life where I was always an independent kid, but once I left home and was out west and on my own, um, it was like kind of a big deal of that I was doing this for me on my own. And so that decision was a big decision for me, to give something up and to try something different. And I literally walked into the Rhode Island School of Design not really knowing what I was doing, except I knew I belonged.
So you began to pursue photography after graduating, and you tell this story about how early in your career you rode your bicycle around New York City, carrying your portfolio and knocking on doors.
Yeah.
What did that season teach you about persistence?
I think the thing that played throughout my whole career that started there was this recognition and understanding of my ability to connect with people. And so the knocking on doors and being persistent and being confident, about where I was headed really played forward into actually my career and how I was on movie sets and in front of really well-known people that under most other circumstances could be intimidating. And in fact, I was really confident with it. It just felt right for me. And so I think part of that was this sense of getting a reaction to my personality and to what my commitment, my assuredness, I wasn't cocky. Maybe I was. I don't think I was cocky. I think I was just confident that this I could do this. I was going to make this happen. I didn't even know what this was, but I was going to make it happen. And it was like a belief in yourself too. That's what it was. It was really just a belief in myself, and I was like, you know what? This works for me. I'm good at this. This is easy. This is fun. This is a challenge. Riding around a bicycle, though, I'll never forget. I used to have this beat up bicycle. It was this beat up thing, had no fenders on it. It was like a 3-speed, like English bike. It was so dangerous, but the only reason I never upgraded is because I could ride it with no hands, like so easily. I could just like wiggle my way through traffic in Manhattan, and have my portfolio under my arm. I would grab on the back of trucks and buses and shit, and get like pulled down Seventh Avenue in Manhattan. It's like a crazy time. I had my Walkman on at the time, and I was living life at its fullest at that moment.
Well, you weren't waiting for opportunities to find you, you were creating them.
Yeah.
How important has that initiative been throughout your career?
The initiative came from a drive that I've got to do this. I've got to prove this to myself. I think that's something that I still do today. That I challenge myself. I'm not afraid to to challenge myself, and I don't believe I'm going to fall on my face either. I think you learn a lot, of course, from your mistakes and your losses and things like that. But but I never go into things with that kind of mindset. I go into it very positively.
And where did that positive mindset come from?
That's a really good question. I think maybe some of my early readings and things in high school, kind of the direction my my mind and my cultural sort of ambition was going, which was to read things that were maybe like the existentialists or or things of that nature, things that made me think of life a certain way and losing family, things that seeing the history, seeing how quickly life goes by um, and being really clear on this is like your one opportunity and the only thing you have control over is your attitude. And so your attitude is what should drive you. And if that's positive, then you're going to have a positive result. And you've got a choice in life, right? You could be you either adapt or succumb to the things that happen. And so to me it was no, you don't succumb. It's one short little moment. And I don't know, I think I became aware of that very early on, that it's a short window of time to be who you want to be and live this life to its fullest, and has to do with positivity and plowing your way through, no matter what.
We've been talking about Timothy's journey from a kid fascinated by images to a young photographer hustling his way through New York City. When we come back, we'll explore how he built trust with some of the world's most recognizable people and why he says he often feels more like a psychologist than a photographer. Don't go anywhere. Leadership isn't just about strategy, it's about people. The Forward Project helps organizations cultivate strong, adaptable leaders who create thriving workplace cultures. If you're ready to invest in your leadership team, visit www.theforwardproject.co to learn how. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and today I'm speaking with renowned photographer, author, and visual storyteller Timothy White, whose extraordinary career has placed him behind the lens of some of the most iconic images in modern culture. Timothy, you've said that you often feel more like a psychologist than a photographer. What exactly do you mean by that?
So yeah, I say that about being a psychologist more than a photographer sometimes, because I recognized early on that I had this ability to interact with people and engage with them and get them to respond to me. Um, as I mentioned earlier, I did that in trying to get work as a young photographer, going out and just keep going, knocking on doors and just keep saying, come on, give me a chance, hire me. And there was something about it. Maybe it was charm, maybe I was cute at that time. I don't know what I was, but I certainly was tenacious and persistent, and it worked for me. And I saw that, and I used that in as my career grew, and actually in not consciously, but I use it in my way of interacting with people. And so I'm reading people on a set. I'm looking at their eyes constantly. Everything's in their eyes. And although I'm doing many things and my peripheral vision is wide, and I'm watching my assistants and I'm watching the lighting, and I'm on the set, I'm watching the hairdresser need to run in, and I'm watching all these different things that are happening. I'm focusing on my subject at all times, and I'm reading them, and I'm seeing as I'm talking, do I have them? Am I losing them? Like what is it? And I know how to reel it in, and I don't mean it to sound, well, it is manipulative, but manipulative too, for a reason. It's not exploitative, it's manipulative, and it's to try and get them to not be aware of the process. And because the process can be intimidating, it's this lens focusing on your pores. It's like it's not the most comfortable thing. And so when I'm shooting, I talk to people, and I'm constantly talking about something or another, and I'm rarely talking about what they've got going on. I'm distracting them. Oh my God, my mother just called me, that kind of thing. Oh, you really? Oh, your mother too? And you know what I mean? And they don't know what's going on. At the same time, I'm telling my assistant, here, just move that light just a little bit over there, Gus, okay? And then as I'm talking to them, I'll go click, 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 and shoot a couple off because I'm feeling something. And then I can write back to them, and I never take that break. So that interaction is very psychological to me. It's emotional, but it's also psychological. And I'm really I'm manipulating it. I'm manipulating the situation to take it to a place where I get a reaction from people. Something people say to me a lot about my pictures is they see that the subject is reacting to me. And unconsciously, that's what I'm looking for. I don't know I'm doing that, and I didn't know I was doing that, but it is about trying to find something in there.
Well, you said that you read emotional states through that eye contact and energy. What exactly are you looking for when you first meet someone?
I'm looking for their availability. I'm looking for how open they are to the process. Again, the process can be intimidating. So there's vanity involved. There's a sense of self, ego. There's all of these things um, that are making people self-conscious. And I've got a process that is focusing on that self-consciousness in a way. So whatever I can do to distract that part of the process, the better. But I want them to react to me. And so I'm directing the show. I'm the leader and I'm directing the show. And I don't know what I want yet because I don't know them, you know, and I don't know the mood they're in. They could have just gotten a fight with their husband, before they walked on the set. They could, be anything, anything. So I need to feel out not what they're going through, but the experience between us. And that's leading them, that's guiding them, that's directing it to where I want it to go. And I don't know where I want it to go because I don't know them yet. It's a process, and I'm trying to work through it for them to be responsive to something. And in that responsiveness and the control of my set, my composition, my lighting, everything, that opens a door for the magic to happen in photography.
Well, how do you establish trust as a leader in those unplanned moments?
I think my confidence definitely makes my subjects feel trust. I remember once I was shooting Susan Sarandon and Dustin Hoffman. And Susan and I were good friends, and we known each other well. We did a lot together. And Dustin, I've never met before, and I was just so confident, kind of cocky because I knew Susan so well. So we were like really friendly. It was like brother sister, kind of having some fun. And Dustin was like said something to me. He was like, "Why are you so confident? Do you know the level of talent you have in this room?" I mean, he was just being funny, but it was like I didn't realize what I was doing, but I was just totally comfortable. But that made him comfortable enough to say something like that to me too. So it developed um, you know, this rapport that broke ice and allowed him to react to me differently. And then of course Susan jumped in and said something like, "You don't know who this guy is and what he's done. He owns a town. That kind of thing." So it's again, it's a process. And I'm layering and I'm building as I direct it. And I'm not just directing my subjects, I'm directing my staff and I'm directing, the composition and the light. And I'm constantly changing it until I find things. I also work fast and like to, um, I like to do a lot of different setups, a lot of different changes. So different lighting, different backgrounds, different lens, different wardrobe, different whatever, and just keep changing it. That also keeps my subjects moving and keeps them distracted from the process. Next thing you know, they come out of it, and we've done so much work, and out of that, we've done such great work, and they were completely distracted. They were like, "Wow, that was fun," and then they leave, and I'm like, "Phew, I'm wasted from it," but that's what I get off on. It's like it's controlling something I don't have control over in a way.
Well, in your book, you write about a particular shoot that you did with Brad Pitt that ultimately became a lesson in operating under pressure and really trusting your instincts. Can you tell us what happened and what that experience taught you about finding calm in high stakes situations?
Yeah, that was a really special thing. So I had this photo shoot with Brad Pitt for a movie poster, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, with him and Angelina Jolie. And I'm into motorcycles, and I had a friend of mine who was a motorcycle guru, who was this really custom motorcycle builder, crazy man that I was friends with, and I was with him when he passed away. And so I did a book because I had like 20 years of photographs of him. And so I did this coffee table book, and it was really a great, successful book. And he was a real character, and everyone in the motorcycle world knew who he was. So when I showed up on the set with Brad Pitt and Angelina, like my book had just come out, and I was promoting the book, but I'm in this shooting a movie poster with two of the biggest, sexiest people in Hollywood at the moment, and it was all about that. But instead, when they walked in the room, he was all over me because of my book and motorcycles. And so all we did was start talking about that. And over the course of the shoot, we just kept talking more and more about it. And he was so into it because he was into motorcycles as well. And sometime at the end of the shoot, he was like, we should ride together sometime. And I was like, yeah, sure, great. And I never thought that would happen. And then he called me up and said that he had a few days to do this ride. And I was like, I'm down. And so I planned this whole photo shoot, and I called the studio and said, well, I'm just doing a shoot with him. I'm going to get the studio to pay for this, and I'm going to make it like a photo thing. So we rented a motorhome, and I got a stylist full of clothes, and my assistants and equipment were in the motorhome, and Brad and I rode our motorcycles through the Mojave Desert and for a number of days, and they followed. And when I saw something, I stopped and took pictures. And the spontaneity of that, the um, the um, the inherent danger in it on one hand, not just in what we were doing in the vehicles we were, uh, handling and the circumstances, but also not knowing what I was going to get. Yet I had to come back. I had the biggest car on the planet, and I had a studio paying for it, and I had a lot of expenses, and I had a lot going on here. I'd put a lot of myself into this. It had to happen. It was one of those. Suppose it rained. What do you do? And you're on a motorcycle. It's a different kind of shoot. So that was a big piece of it. Brad at one point had a little bit of an accident and went off his motorcycle, and that was dangerous, and it was nerve-wracking. But we ended up getting it back together and continuing the shoot, and out of that came the most amazing photographs. We ended up in wild places, and I produced a body of work that not only was really unique and really stands out as one of the highlights of my career, but also a really defining moment, both for him, for me, and just an amazing life experience, which is the way I treat my photo shoots. It's like, it's got to work for me. It's got to be something that I want to do and kind of do it my way. And out of that comes that special stuff.
Timothy's ability to connect with people has helped him create unforgettable images. After the break, we'll talk about leadership, creativity under pressure, and what happens when everything doesn't go according to plan. Stay with us. Are you looking to connect with an audience passionate about leadership, growth, and success? Become a sponsor of Expressions of Leadership and align your brand with inspiring conversations that make an impact. Contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com to explore sponsorship opportunities. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and my guest today is Timothy White, internationally acclaimed photographer and author of the upcoming memoir, Life Through My Lens. Timothy, one story from your book involves photographing Colin Powell at the Pentagon with severe restrictions and only a few minutes to work. How do you perform when conditions are far from ideal?
I have a big bag of tricks. I've got to be, I'm overly prepared, but I'm prepared to not know what I'm walking into. So again, I keep coming back to the confidence in somehow, some way, I'm going to get something. And it may not be the ultimate opportunity, both technically or otherwise, time, interaction with the subject, but there's definitely going to be something that I'm going to get out of it. And I walked into the Pentagon expecting, like, okay, I'm going to be able to do what I want to do with the Secretary of Defense. And I walked in, and some lieutenant, that grabbed me and pulled me in a room like immediately, and he just like pointed in my face. This is what you're allowed to do. No this, no that, no. Blah, 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 blah. He went through this whole thing, and it basically came down to no tripod, no light, no anything. You have a camera, you can go in the room. It's not the kind of photographer I am. I'm not a journalist. I'm not somebody who shoots from the hip. My stuff is more contrived. It's planned. It's lit properly. It's composed properly. Like, that's what I do. And then within those confines, the magic can happen, which is the interaction between me and my subject. But in this particular case, it was like, okay. And I'm ushered into a room with him. And I had literally had just a couple of minutes with him in his office. And, if I have to brace myself against a wall because the light is low and I don't have a tripod to have the camera still, or there's times when I'm leaning on my assistant's head with a camera to try and be still. Um, and then again, you kind of look at things, you look at the picture and go, okay, well, this isn't the most ideal setting. It's an ugly office, it's whatever. But you know what? I'll put this lens on, it'll distort it a little bit, it will make that sort of banal office look kind of funny. And then I've got the Secretary of Defense in there, or whatever it is that gave me that little bit of a twist to make that picture more interesting. And that's what I got out of it. And again, not knowing what I'm going to get out of it, um, but being confident when I walk up the room, I'll come out with something.
Well, you aren't just comfortable with uncertainty, you actually tend to gravitate towards it. And many leaders certainly don't want that. They want certainty before taking action. What has uncertainty taught you?
I think it helps me deal with life as it happens and unfolds in front of me. Again, I'm not afraid. I'm willing to experience. I want to feel it. I'd rather have the fever than take the aspirin. I don't want to hide it. I want to know that I want to feel life, and I think that's part of it.
You describe your sets as collaborative environments with large teams all working together. What makes a great creative team in your mind?
Focus again, dedication. I often say when I'm interviewing kids and stuff like that, I'd rather have enthusiasm over professionalism. I want someone who wants to be there. I want somebody whose eye is on the ball. I get somebody who wants it. They don't have to know anything, but if they want to be there, if they want to learn, then I want to teach. Um, and there's something to learn. What we do, maybe because of my spontaneity, maybe because of my bag of tricks, maybe because of my confidence, but all of that stuff is definitely something that I lead with and they learn from. There's just no doubt about that. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who are, and again, like it could be young kids. My oldest collaborative working assistant, who's been with me for over 30 years, who's now a photographer in his own right, but we still work together. When I have jobs, I still call him. We met on the subway. He was a student, and he was not prepared to be in the position that he eventually took. But he was so dedicated and he had no ego. His name was Gus, and I love Gus. And no ego. It was about a focus on the shoot. He was there for me and for the process, what we were doing. And that said a lot to me. I learned from him, because of who he was. My position is full of ego. His position was ego less, So it was, yeah, I learned from him.
What do you think was the most important lesson you learned from him?
Uh, a little humility, um, teamwork, trust. You know, I could trust Gus. I knew he was there. I have this, I have this thing. I'm bouncing off the walls. I'm vibrating, but I'm still focused. Right when I'm working, there's too much going on. Too many people, and the light. My lighting is very, very important. It needs to be tweaked. We need to be there. It needs to be on point. And again, I'm distracted, but I'm focused on my subject because that's where I'm not losing, right? I'm not losing the eye contact, but yet I'm peripherally involved in so much. And I hear myself because I did it thousands and thousands and thousands of times, which is Gus, are we there? Getting emotional. I'm sorry, because I trusted him. He was on point. He knew his job to be the best he could be. He had to allow me to be the best I could be. That's teamwork.
Thank you for sharing your story about Gus. It's really it's really clear that you care about him.
Yeah.
Gus liked to use a baseball analogy for managing a shoot. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, again, it's about being focused, about being present. That's how you get to the top of your game. It's not being distracted. It's not being self-conscious or any of those things. It's about being in the moment and really focusing on it. And Gus's analogy was, okay, baseball diamond, man on first and third. It's playing second base. The ball comes to me. What do I do? Does the shortstop run over to second and I throw it to him? Do I throw it to home plate? Like, what do I do? It's thinking ahead. And that's why I always relied on Gus to say, are we there, Gus? Because I knew Gus knew all the points. And yes, go. Yeah. There's another moment I'll just add to that. I had this really wonderful, wonderful, famous picture of Harrison Ford riding by me at full gallop on a horse. And Gus and I had this thing where when I can't see a subject who's moving to get to their mark, he can tell me, and we had this timing down where it was when like a fraction of a second. When he said something, I knew I hit shutter. And even though we were off when he said it from when I pushed the shutter, it was the perfect time. And he did it that fraction of a second ahead to make sure that I hit that mark. And I had 3 frames with Harrison. And Gus stood on the mark. I've pre-focused on him, set up a light so that it worked and it was perfect ratio of lighting and natural light, fake light and natural light. And as Harrison comes galloping full speed on this horse, Gus goes, now. And as he said that, that's when I hit the shutter. So it's a fraction of a second off, but yet every one of those 3 frames, perfect and tack sharp. And it's because of that confidence and also trust in each other and also an understanding and focus on our game. That's like at its highest level as far as I'm concerned. Yet it's spontaneous, yet it's fun. Yet it's a moment that you didn't know was going to happen. You didn't plan it. So I can come away from shoots getting stuff that other people don't get because I'm not trying too hard to be preconceived. I try and put myself in the moment and react.
Well, your leadership philosophy also really seems to be rooted in kindness. Where does that come from?
I don't know, but I certainly can remember times when I was, a young assistant and stuff where I wasn't treated with kindness, and or maybe it was someone's insecurity or their lack of confidence that made them react to the people who were just there to learn from them in a way that didn't make them feel good. There were times when you get yelled at on a set or you get made fun of or something that you didn't do the right thing. And that's not the way to treat people. That's not the way, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar, right? So that's not the way to make people feel good about their job and to want to be a part of your team, to want to follow you. And I think maybe it's some of that maybe I've experienced in my life. The other thing is hearing about other situations and witnessing some of them was the way leaders behaved was not the way I wanted to be. I want to have fun. Come on, let's be serious about what we're doing, right? This is fun and it needs to be fun. And so if I could make everybody around me be a part of it and feel like they're part of the team and collaborate and feel like they don't have to be behind me, but can be even in front of me. And you know what? In fact, on a set, sometimes if I really need to think about something and come up with a solution, it's fine that Gus is talking to the celebrity. I don't care. That gives me a second to think differently. And so I involved my staff in the process in a way that gave them some ownership in it. And that's a real collaboration.
Well, Timothy has spent decades creating extraordinary work, but his memoir reveals that some of his greatest lessons came away from the camera. After the break, we'll discuss resilience, reinvention, and the personal experiences that transformed his perspective on life. We'll be right back. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and today we're exploring the remarkable life and career of photographer Timothy White. Your memoir goes far beyond photography. What made you decide that it was finally time to tell your own story?
I think, you know, there's there was a it's a time of my life, age and an accomplishment, I guess, where I started to look at it in a different way and started to reflect back on it and look at my voluminous archive and go, how the did I make that happen? Like how did I do all this? Um, and it's a who's who of pop culture history, for the last 40 years or so. And I started to recognize, that whole concept of being a storyteller. I never just saw myself that way. I just did what I do, It's just interacting with people. It's being friendly. It's just, like that's who I am. But instead, it was like, no, all of that made all of this happen, and all of that is a story, is experiences, and the more I started to talk about them, I started to think about my life, and I started to think about, well, it's not all been like, you know, butterflies and Hollywood and glamour and glitz and all of that, that I've lived through my own turmoils and ups and downs and losses and betrayals and all the things that happen in life. And if I can tell my story, um, look, we're not talking cancer here. We're not talking things, but we all have an ups and down in life. And how did I manage to fly every week and do what I had to do and walk into these rooms and be present and focus and accomplish and do and build this career and pay employees and all that took place to do that at the same time when other things were happening in my life that were challenges, big challenges. And so how do you do that? How do you come back from that? And I thought that there's a story to tell there. So not only am I reflecting at this time in my life, um, but I recognize that as part of my, legacy, if I will, it's to sort of tell the story behind it. And that includes my personal part of that story.
Well, you write pretty openly about these personal challenges, including financial setbacks and, as you said, betrayal and divorce and family loss. Was it difficult for you to be that vulnerable?
I'm a pretty direct person and pretty vulnerable person to begin with. I'm an emotional person. I'm not afraid to express myself in any way. It wasn't difficult to write. It's difficult to read. It's difficult for me to look at it now in its entirety. The process of writing this book is something I've never done before. My storytelling was visual. I mean, it was verbal, but I didn't know that. I just thought I'm social, and people would tell me that, oh, you're a good storyteller or whatever. But I didn't see myself that way. I thought my expression was visual. So to finally write it and to see it on paper and to edit it and revise it and go through to do something um, that has the same level of creativity and intent and professionalism and all of that as I do in my other work required time and effort. And the more I reread it, the more I went through it, the more it became emotional for me because I started to see my life for the first time in a different way. And so writing the memoir and having that be my story, was like, wow, how did all of this happen, including my ability to express it really clearly, and then to then match it to edit and design a coffee table book, a companion book, where the images are both my professional work as well as images of my family and me growing up and really vulnerable stuff. I mean, I cried every day, Michele, in designing this stuff. I still can. I can bring it on like in a minute. It's a moment in my life. It's a turning point.
You've spent decades documenting other people's stories. What did you learn about yourself when you turned that lens inward?
All those other people's stories that you're saying I did um, were part of my story anyway. Um, you know, a photograph is my version of them. It's not it's not their version of them, and it's not necessarily a real version of them. It's an illusion. It's something that I create through the tools, through my intent, through the moment, the decisive moment I push the shutter. All of those things create a photograph, but it's my version of it, right? And so that I'm in control of. The thing about my book and my life as I started to write it down, it's not. I wasn't in control of it. It's not an illusion. It's very real. And now I've forced myself to relive it and to look at it differently and to look at it clearly and to see how it all played into context together with as I was going on this crazy ride that I've been on. At the same time, there were all of these other things that affected it, and my satisfaction in it is that I managed to get through it in a really healthy way, And so, at this age, I just turned 70, and I'm like, I'm healthier, in every possible way than I feel I've ever been in my life. And part of that was writing this book. Part of it was opening myself up, like ripping my chest open. In fact, the companion book has a photograph of my father on the cover. My memoir has me, and the monograph has my dad, and it's him with a scar on his chest from his heart operation. He's bare chested, and you just see his scar. And kind of that's the way I felt with this book. And so, what I'm getting from it is a wonderful sense of a life well lived and a sense of self that I'm proud of, including being as vulnerable and honest and I'm not sugarcoating anything. And it's not a tell-all by any means. That's not what the book's about. If anything, it's a tell-all about me, not about my subjects.
Well, speaking of your family, you write about your parents in your book. How did caring for them change your understanding of life and leadership?
I didn't really take care of them, okay? I mean, I've got to be honest about that. It was like I was the youngest. I was living in California, and my parents were on the East Coast. My eldest sister really took them into her home in their 90s and really took care of them. And with that, we also had um, caregivers, and so they were well taken care of for people who I participated. Let's put it that way. We all did, all the siblings, and I did my part as best I could. But what we did was we took care of my parents in a really loving way for people who did not have a plan for that. No one expects, what your final days are going to be like. Sometimes they're abrupt, and sometimes they're not pretty. In this case, my parents lived healthy till the end. It's like your mind or your body goes, one or the other, but their minds went before their bodies went. And so it was a challenge. But what I saw in the process was even though they didn't have a plan and didn't have the money, we took care of them as best as we could. And what that gave to me was a perspective on life that was what's important. And what's important is love. And the love is what took care of them because we did. We made sure they were okay till the day they passed. And um, we did that as a family with a lot of humor and a lot of pain and a lot of stuff, But especially given the richness of my life and career, to be able to put in perspective what's really important, that it's not about your job and it's not about what you have, it's not about your stuff, it's not about your career, it's not about any of it. In the end, you go full circle of life, which we were lucky enough to witness with my parents. They went a full circle and they were children again, being taken care of. And the only thing that mattered was the love that we gave to take care of them. The rest of it goes by the wayside. So, what a wonderful perspective for me to look at my life as I flitted about the world and, for 40 something years with some of the shiniest objects in history. And that was a big lesson for me. So all of that goes back to the reason I wrote the book too. It's like I have a perspective. I have a point of view. And if I can impart that to somebody else and they get something from it, great. If it's really just me and it's therapeutic, it's cathartic by me doing it and putting it out there, okay, that's okay too.
Well, what are you hoping that ultimately they get out of that book?
Well, I mean, the perspective I just talked about for sure. Because so here's somebody who seemingly, was on top of the world, but just like everybody else, shit happens. Things happen in your life. You have loss, you have pain. Relationships are everything, everything. They there's so many factors that drive your life. And so, like, how do you lead your life? What are your choices? Again, choice is your attitude. Your choices is being present. Your choice is to say, okay, I've got 5 kids. I don't make enough money. We're all in a 2-bedroom apartment. Like, how do I deal with this and not act out my childhood traumas, or screw up my kids, or not provide, or, what do you do? Again, I said earlier about adapt or succumb. You could end up becoming a drug addict, or you could end up rising to the occasion and really challenging yourself and really doing great things. Those are your choices in life.
Well, we're going to take one final break. And when we return, we'll look ahead to what's next for Timothy, the legacy that he hopes to leave, and we'll close with some wisdom and whimsy. Stay tuned. Don't miss a thing. Follow Expressions of Leadership on your favorite podcast app and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and today I'm joined by Timothy White, one of the most influential photographers of our time and author of the upcoming memoir, Life Through My Lens. Timothy, after more than 4 decades behind the camera, what still excites you creatively?
It's interesting you say that because I've been involved in all aspects of business, and I owned a gallery for 20 something years. I've directed, I produce, I write, I do all these different things. But when I'm out in that moment, it's a moment. I'm completely engrossed in it. And there's we talked about a little bit, there's a spontaneity, there's a reactivity, is that the right word? I'm not as planned as reactive. And the not knowing is what excites me. And I mean, it's kind of a metaphor for life. And that plays into some of our other conversation here. It's like if we knew what life was really about, we would live it differently. And so the not knowing is really is something that I get off on. And I like it. And so there's that thrill of having this machine that allows me to capture moments. Um, and I don't know what those moments are going to bring, but I have the ability to control some of what happens so that I can get something that pleases my eye and my mind and my sensibilities and my drive for unique experience. And so I get off on it, and it's adrenaline. It's like it's an adrenaline thing because I don't know and because I'm confident in my enjoyment of not knowing.
And when you think about the future, what are you most curious about exploring next?
I don't know, to be honest. I really don't. Um, I think there's a truth to what I've just done to myself by putting this out. Um, I'd like to explore a little bit more of that and see where this takes me. I know for a fact that I am at a turning point in my life, and I want to be a lot more creative. I want to I want to explore this truth that I'm willing to put out there because I think it's a creative risk, and risk taking is the way to move forward and to achieve. Um, I believe in consistency as well, and that's another way to achieve. Consistency equals growth, and so I'm a big proponent staying the course and working through things. It's the only way, you know. You want to learn to play guitar, you got to practice every day. You want muscles, you got to go to the gym every day. You know, you got to do in life all the things that'll help you get to your goals. And again, again, this is back to what the book's about. It's like while you're doing that, keep getting hit, you know, with real life, and it's how you deal with it and what you do with it that allows you to move forward. And there's no reason to not keep moving forward because that's all you got because it's short. So it's one foot in front of the other, and you just keep going. And so I think that you know is kind of what the book's about. I think.
As you reflect on your remarkable career and the release of Life Through My Lens, what legacy do you hope to leave both through the images that you've created and through the way that you've lived your life?
Oh, I don't know. I think by the nature of the people that I've photographed and the fact that I did it, not to, not to keep quoting the song, but did it my way, you know, uniquely my vision, my point of view. Um, that's leaving something behind. If it was just pictures of sunsets, I could be a great photographer, the best sunset photographer in the world. But the people that I've collaborated with have also left an indelible mark, you know, on this planet and on pop culture, on history. And the fact that my point of view put their image out there for in perpetuity is kind of cool.
Well, for listeners who want to learn more about your work, your books, or upcoming projects, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on TW on Instagram, Timothy White, just Timothy White, or timothywhite.com, my website. The book is sold at bookstores everywhere or online or on Amazon. Um, yeah, go pick it up, man. Who knows? Might get something from it.
Well, now it's time for our wisdom and whimsy segment of the show, where I get to ask the guest one advice question and one fun question. Starting with the advice question. In a world that often encourages people to fit a certain mold, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to find and trust their own voice?
You know what's right and what isn't. Ultimately, at least with me in life, I know what's pure. I know what feels like it's real. And I know when it's not. I know when I'm not fully engaged. I know when I'm not fully believing something. I know when I'm not feeling confident and good about my decision making or what I'm experiencing. You know, when I do work, when I'm doing my work, whether it's writing or taking pictures, whatever it is, it's like I know if it's done well. I know if I put everything into it, and that's part of the commitment of things. You know, if you're willing to commit and put your full self in it, you know, you know, and you'll get the results. And so, you know, when it's about career or about finding yourself, you know, it takes some soul searching. It takes a little looking inside yourself, but it's also somewhat innate. Like you know if it's right or not.
And now for the fun question. You photographed presidents and movie stars, musicians, and cultural icons. If you could travel back in time and photograph any historical figure anywhere in the world, who would it be? And what kind of photograph would you want to create?
I would say my grandparents that I never met, because that would tell me something more about my dad. That would tell me more about myself. I said that because I don't know, you know, it's like, would I have loved to photograph Buster Keaton? You know, my heroes, some of my Hollywood heroes and my musical heroes, sure. But I also already did a lot of them, so it's just somebody else and whose work I admire or something. But I think like saying my grandparents kind of meant something to me because my grandparents died when my father was a teenager, and so I didn't really get to know them. And how would I photograph them? You know, it would be the way I photograph everybody. It would be intimacy. There would be fun. There would be an interaction. There would be whimsy. There would be like what I do, you know, to try and pull something from somebody that resonates with me.
Well, Timothy, thank you so much for sharing your extraordinary journey with us. What I find so incredibly compelling about your story is that while the photographs may be what the world sees, the deeper story is about curiosity and courage and connection, and also that willingness to keep reinventing yourself through every chapter of life.
Thank you. You know, Michelle, when you mention chapters, and it's something that I've embraced in my life is the different chapters. And I think that's a big part of leadership too. It's embracing it.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of Expressions of Leadership. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the podcast with your friends, colleagues, and fellow leaders. You can also connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and this has been Expressions of Leadership. Until next time, keep leading with curiosity, creating with courage, and remembering that every meaningful life is a story still in motion. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins.